Hi, I'm Marcella Wynn. I turned a family startup into a $1 billion empire. And last week, my own mother handed me a contract to erase myself from it. They didn't just steal my work. They wrote me out of my own legacy while smiling for the cameras. And that night, I sat in the front row and watched them do it. The lights shimmered across the Hyatt ballroom like liquid gold. My reflection glowed in every wine glass and polished fork. It felt like standing inside a dream I had built, yet wasn't invited to live in. The projector hummed overhead, flashing a timeline of Winteca's growth, every milestone I had spent years chasing, until my own name vanished from the story. My father's voice filled the room, confident, warm, rehearsed. Let's give a round of applause to our visionaries, Callista Trenum and Lucan Fry. His words rolled through the speakers like thunder dressed as pride. My fingers tightened around the stem of my champagne flute until the glass groaned. He didn't say my name. Not once. A woman beside me whispered, "Wasn't she one of the founders?" Another leaned closer. Maybe she was just an early employee. You know how families rewrite history. I wanted to turn and correct them, to remind them who wrote the first line of code that built this empire. Instead, I stared at the bubbles in my glass and thought of every night I'd stayed awake debugging under fluorescent light. I could still feel the warmth of my old apartment, the hum of my laptop, the ache in my back from those folding chairs I called furniture. When I blinked again, the LED screen above the stage shifted. Founding visionaries, Callista Trenum, Lucan Fry. Below that line, in smaller print, advisory board, Marcella Wynn, technical consultant. Non-voting. My heart sank through the floor. My pulse roared in my ears. I pressed my lips together, so hard I could taste metal. I remembered my father calling years ago after I landed the first corporate client. "You're overworking, honey. It's just a side project." That side project had paid his mortgage, bought Callista's MBA, and turned Wintec into the family's crown jewel. Yet tonight, I was a footnote at best, an inconvenient line in the company's history. My mother dabbed her eyes in the front row as if emotion excused omission. She smiled when Callista stood up, glittering in a silver dress that caught every light. Beside her, Lucan flashed his trademark investor grin. The applause rose around me. I didn't join in. Callista's voice echoed through the microphone. "This company is proof that dreams, when led with unity, can change the world." Unity, the word curdled in my stomach. My badge caught the spotlight when I looked down. Marcella Wynn, founding team, legacy role, guest. Like I had wandered into the wrong house. I could feel a tremor creeping through my arm, small and stubborn. I tucked it under the table and smiled so no one would see. That's how women like me are trained to handle betrayal. Quietly, gracefully, invisibly. The clinking of glasses returned me to the present. My father raised his drink toward Callista and Lucan, to the next decade of Wintec. I thought of the first night we'd sat around our old kitchen table, planning this company. My father had drawn logos on napkins. Callista had painted her nails. I'd shown them the algorithm that could automate inventory control for small businesses. My mother had laughed softly. "You should patent that." I did. They just took the credit later. Now, under the ballroom lights, I realized this wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate deletion. Every pause, every omission was orchestrated. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd planned my absence. The scent of champagne mixed with the citrus of expensive perfume. People laughed around me, taking selfies with the new leaders. I sat still, breathing through the burn in my chest. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. The first signs were subtle. Fewer CC'd emails, meetings I didn't need to attend, my photo missing from the website. Each absence had been a warning disguised as efficiency. I folded the program in my lap, pressing my thumb over Callista's photo. "This is how erasure feels," I whispered under my breath. Not loud, just permanent. The speech ended with fireworks on the screen. I stayed seated while the crowd rose to their feet. The applause felt like static against my skin. When Callista stepped down from the stage, her heels clicked like punctuation marks sealing a chapter one hadn't agreed to end. She passed by my row and paused just long enough to whisper, "You should smile more, Marcella. Cameras are everywhere." I smiled. I always do when I'm bleeding inside. As the lights dimmed for the next act, I stood. The air was thick with perfume and pretense. Every face glowed with the comfort of success that wasn't theirs to claim. I slipped out through the side doors into the hotel corridor. The hum of the ballroom faded behind me, replaced by the muffled sound of laughter and clinking glasses. I leaned against the wall, my breath trembling in the quiet. "I haven't been forgotten," I murmured. "I've been erased." Outside, the Austin skyline glittered like a promise I'd once believed in. My name had built that glow, line by line, brick by silent brick. But inside that room, I wasn't even background noise. Looking back, that was the night I stopped being their foundation and became my own wall. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I walked past the portraits in the hallway. My heels echoed against the marble floor that hadn't changed in 2 decades. The faces on the walls were all familiar. Founders, donors, the family legacy built on glass and carefully arranged smiles. I stopped at the end of the row. My frame was gone. The one photo of me taken 5 years ago when we hit our first $1 million in annual revenue. It used to hang just beside my father's. Now, only a faint rectangle remained on the paint. A ghost. I didn't speak. I didn't touch the wall. I turned toward the dining room where the voices were already growing louder, where decisions had been made without me. The chandelier above the table was dimmed just enough to feel intentional. Soft lighting cast shadows across every plate, every silver fork, as if the house itself was trying to say, "Someone doesn't belong." Lucan sat at the head of the table. His tie was loosened, his glass full. Callista leaned into his shoulder, her laughter just a little too bright. My father was sipping wine with the usual distant approval, and my mother, Isolde, was already carving into the roast duck with her signature grace. No one looked up when I entered. I took my place near the end. My plate was already served, precisely but without acknowledgement. My mother spoke as if she had rehearsed the line. "Marcella, dear, you've always been brilliant with code. But running a company, that's a different kind of brilliance." I hadn't touched my wine. The stem of the glass felt foreign in my fingers. Lucan added, "We're moving towards scalable governance, board-aligned leadership, vision paired with capital movement, strategy over operations. You know the drill." I didn't blink. So this wasn't a conversation. It was a declaration. I smiled, not from amusement. It was the kind of smile you make when someone slaps you gently and expects you to thank them. Just to clarify, I said quietly, "This means what? Exactly?" Callista topped off Lucan's glass and offered a practiced smile. "It means evolution. Marcella, we've all grown, shifted. You're incredible in systems design, but leadership is visibility. You're not exactly presentable." Lucan chuckled. "You're a genius behind the curtain, but this generation, investors want a face. Behind the curtain." I heard the phrase repeat in my mind, each syllable heavy. I looked to my father. His eyes didn't lift. He was too busy nodding at Lucan, too proud of the show he thought he'd produced. Looking back, I should have stood up and walked away. But I didn't. Not yet. My fork hovered in the air, mid-reach, then slowly returned to the plate. My stomach churned, not from the food, but from the familiarity of being excluded in plain sight. My mother folded her napkin gently. "This isn't personal. It's just business." I met her eyes then. "It's only not personal to the people who get to keep their titles." She didn't flinch. "Titles come and go, darling. What matters is what people remember." I let the silence stretch until it felt like a wound. They weren't just rewriting the company. They were rewriting me. From the beginning, I was the one who stayed when things broke down, who held the product together through 12 failed client integrations, who worked back-end all-nighters while Callista hosted brand summits. But here, in this room, where the ceiling smelled like the old varnish of control and the tables still bore the knife grooves of childhood dinners, I was nothing more than an afterthought. I remembered being 18 at this same table, showing my mother sketches of what would become our first UI dashboard. She smiled then and said, "You'll make a great helper to whoever runs things someday." Back then, I thought it was humility, encouragement, a subtle nudge toward balance. Now, I understood. They never expected me to lead. They expected me to build the floor someone else would walk across. Lucan cleared his throat. "We're drafting a formal transition. I'll take point as CEO. Callista will stay Chief Brand Officer. Marcella, your role will be advisory." My voice was quiet, but it carried. "Non-voting, right?" He nodded, not even ashamed. It wasn't a knife. It was a scalpel. Delicate, deliberate. Callista's hand rested on our mother's shoulder. "It's time we modernize, Mom. And sometimes that means letting go of the past." My father raised his glass. "To Lucan, our future." And just like that, the people who gave me life erased my place in it. I didn't cry. That would have been a gift they didn't deserve. I nodded once, not in agreement, but in confirmation of the moment, of the line they had finally crossed. They mistook my silence for surrender, but I had only just begun to count the cost of being erased. The morning light looked colder than usual when I pulled up outside Wintech. I hadn't planned on coming here. It was muscle memory, instinct. Maybe I just needed proof that everything I remembered was real. Inside, the lobby looked the same, clean, gleaming, soulless. The security guard gave me a hesitant nod. "Morning, Ms. Wynn. Didn't know you'd be in." "Neither did I," I murmured. The elevator to the 7th floor felt slower than I remembered. Every ding echoed like a mocking drumbeat. When the doors slid open, the founder's corridor stretched out before me. The last time I walked it, I was still someone. Now, each step felt like I was walking into a crime scene where I was the missing person. And then I saw it. The wall where my photo once hung was bare. In its place, a shiny portrait of Callista Trenum, smiling under gold letters, Our Visionaries. The plaque below read, Innovation Division, 2016, present, transforming legacy systems into tomorrow's solutions. Legacy. They'd turned my life's work into a slogan and given it her name. My reflection flickered across the frame, hovering beside Callista's image like a ghost. Hers was bright and polished. Mine was faint, barely there. This wall used to prove I existed. I whispered. Now it just shows who they wished had built it all. A young employee passed, glancing at me like I was a misplaced memory. Miss Wynn, need help finding someone? No, I replied quietly, just remembering who I used to be. I continued down the hallway. My name was gone from the door of my old office, replaced by fresh paint, but they hadn't covered the screw holes properly. The past always lingers in small mistakes. Inside, I sat at my old desk. I typed in my password. It still worked, but the terminal hesitated, like the system itself was unsure if I belonged. When it finally opened, my heart stopped. Project Origin, my creation, was still there, but the author credits, C. Trenum and L. Fry. No mention of me. Not a single trace. I checked the commit logs. My initials had been wiped clean. No history. No proof. It was like watching someone scrub my name from the family Bible. They didn't just push me out. I thought they deleted me, rewrote me out of my own legacy. I pulled a small SSD from my bag, a relic I never stopped carrying, plugged it in, and there it was. My code, my fingerprints, my voice, every note, every early bug fix, every messy comment I left for myself. Remember to test overnight build. Proof. Then came a voice from the doorway. Marcella, you can't be here without clearance. It was Jenna from HR. She used to bring me tea during overnight builds. Now, she stood like a stranger guarding a border. Clearance? For my own office. You know how transitions go. It's not personal. I laughed once, sharp. No, of course not. Corporations don't do personal. She sighed. You were the heart of this place. I'm sorry. Hearts are easy to replace here, I said, powering down the screen. They just install newer, shinier ones. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. The silence said it all. After she left, I sat still. My reflection shimmered in the black screen. Older, worn, but real. More real than the glossy smiles in the hallway. I attached my version history to an email, addressed it to myself. Blind copied my lawyer. Subject: Ownership verification, Project Origin. I stared at it, fingers hovering, then clicked send. If they won't remember me, I whispered, I'll make sure they can't forget me. As I left, I paused by the wall again. The outline of my photo was still visible, like a scar beneath makeup. Faint but undeniable. They thought they could erase me. That morning, I stopped hoping they'd acknowledge me. I started preparing to make them regret they didn't. The next morning, an email waited in my inbox like a trap disguised as a gift. The subject line read, Founder Advisory, Input Welcome, harmless words, until I saw the sender. Lucan Fry. I stared at it. What kind of person invites you to a meeting at the company they stole from you? Still, I clicked accept. curiosity, or maybe spite pushed my hand. By noon, I was walking through the glass-paneled lobby. The same receptionist, once chipper with a "Good morning, Ms. Wynne," now paused before smiling. "They said you'd be joining as a guest," she said, handing me a plastic badge. It hissed out of the printer like a sigh. "Visitor Marcella Wynne." "Guest," I echoed. How thoughtful. The executive floor felt colder than I remembered. Sleek, sanitized, the kind of place that pretends success while it sucks out your breath. No one rose to greet me when I entered the conference room. Not even my father. I took the seat at the far end. No armrests, no cushion. Just a chair, stripped of comfort. Callista avoided my eyes, thumbs tapping her phone. My mother offered a tight, socialite smile, one meant to deflect, not welcome. Lucan stood near the screen, sleeves rolled, grin sharpened to perfection. "Let's begin," he said, as if I hadn't once been his mentor. The monitor flickered to life. Strategic licensing opportunity, Project Helix. My stomach turned. Helix wasn't just software. It was the pulse of everything I built. Lines of code scribbled at 3 a.m., servers humming in my first apartment, algorithms shaped by instinct and obsession. Lucan spoke like a salesman. This platform, developed internally over the last 5 years, is ready for external monetization through a permanent transfer. Permanent transfer. The words scraped down my spine. I raised my hand. Who owns the IP on Helix? The room went still. Lucan's eyes narrowed. All systems developed within WinTech default to company holdings under Clause 5.1. That's standard. I kept my tone, level. Project Helix originated under my LLC prior to any merger. The licensing renewal was pending last month. You never signed it. He blinked. Must have been a clerical oversight. My mother finally spoke. "Marcella, does everything have to be about ownership? Sometimes contribution is enough." "Ownership," I said quietly, "is the difference between being thanked and being robbed." No response, just the sound of paper shuffling, a fake distraction. Lucan cleared his throat. The board is aligned. Sentiment doesn't scale. Strategy does. Callista chimed in. "Marcella, you more than anyone should understand. Nostalgia doesn't pay dividends." Nostalgia. They thought this was about memories. I thought of my old apartment, the folding table I worked from, the power cables like vines at my feet. I remembered my mother's visit, how she stared at my monitors with disapproval. "Why are you still doing this?" she'd asked. "You could get a job, a husband." I had said nothing, just kept typing, drowning out her judgment with the click of my keyboard. Now, years later, she wore designer clothes and the same disapproval, just with better lighting. I reached into my bag and placed a manila folder on the table. "This is the original IP registration," I said. "Time-stamped, signed, still active, still mine." My father shifted. "Marcella, don't make this harder than it has to be." "For who?" I asked. "The thieves or the bystanders?" Lucan leaned forward. "Is that a threat of legal action?" "No," I said. "It's a reminder of what truth looks like in black and white." Callista scoffed. "This is dramatic. No one's trying to hurt you." "That's the thing about betrayal," I said. "You never see it clearly until it's already bled you dry." The projector whirred as Lucan clicked through slides, pretending nothing had happened. But no one was looking at the screen. All eyes were on the folder. On me. I stood, slow and deliberate. If this company wants to go to war over something it stole, I said, you'd better learn how to breathe, because I was the one keeping it alive. No one followed as I walked to the door. Behind me, my mother called out, "Don't make this personal." I didn't turn. It became personal the day you sold my name like a product. In the hallway, I stared at my reflection in the elevator doors. For the first time in months, I didn't see fatigue. I saw resolve. That was the day I stopped asking for recognition and started preparing for justice. When I stepped into the house, the silence wasn't soothing. It was sharp, heavy, pressing on my chest like a weight I hadn't noticed until the door closed behind me. Everything looked too neat, like I'd already started disappearing, and the house was just helping me finish the job. I dropped my bag on the kitchen island and poured a glass of water. It tasted faintly metallic, like something artificial had seeped into the natural. Then came the doorbell. No text, no warning, just that cold, sharp chime. I didn't need to check. My mother never announced herself. Storms rarely do. She stood there in a pale coat, flawless as always. Her scent, designer and familiar, curled around her like smoke. Her smile was soft, but beneath it was calculation dressed as concern. "You must be tired, darling," she said gently. "I brought something for us to go over." She walked inside like it was still her home, her heels clicking across the tile like a countdown. She placed a manila envelope on the counter and folded her hands. "Just a formality," she said, as if that would make it smaller. "Something the lawyers drew up. You'll keep your shares, but your father will take over the voting rights. It's just easier that way. Fewer complications." I stared at the envelope, but didn't touch it. The overhead light threw a split glare across the marble, slicing her reflection down the middle. "This isn't protection," I said flatly. "It's containment." She sighed, perfectly rehearsed. "Marcella, don't be so dramatic. We're trying to safeguard everything you've worked for. You're acting like we're trying to erase you." I crossed my arms. "You are. You just want me to hand over the pen to do it." Her expression flickered just for a second, a crack in the glass. Then it hardened. "You've always been ungrateful," she said, lower now. "Everything we've done was for you. This family, I cut in, used my name, my work, my silence. You changed the credits, altered my title, and told me to smile while doing it." She reached for the envelope again. "You'll sign eventually. Might as well do it calmly." I didn't move. I waited for the echo of her heels to vanish down the hall. The door shut like a period on a sentence I refused to finish. I looked at the envelope for a long time. It wasn't a contract. It was the last performance of pretending they ever saw me. I should have shredded it, but something told me they needed to see what happened next. That night, just before midnight, the phone rang. I almost ignored it, but the sound felt too familiar. "Marcella!" It was Callista. Her voice cracked. I said nothing. I could hear her breathing, uneven. "Please," she said, "don't do this. Don't leak anything. We can fix this. Say it was all a misunderstanding." Her words were brittle, less about guilt, more about damage control. "We're family," she added, weaker now. "No," I said. "Family doesn't sell your work, and call it love." She began to cry. "Lucan didn't mean for it to go this way. Dad said." "Stop," I said. "You're not sorry. You're scared. Then came the final blow from her. You'll regret this. I already did, I said, and hung up. The quiet afterward was louder than her tears. I walked to my study and turned on the lamp. The light brushed across framed patents, my name on every one. They hadn't been able to touch those. My laptop blinked to life. I pulled up the files, drafts, backups, timestamp changes. Proof. I crafted an email addressed to every major investor, media outlet, and stakeholder linked to WinTech. Subject: WinTech Core Technology, ownership clarification and license termination notice. My hand stopped shaking. They wanted silence. Fine, but it would be my silence, on my terms. I added a single line to the email. Effective immediately, all proprietary systems revert to licensing control under WinSolutions LLC. Then I attached everything: logs, revisions, commits with my initials. Schedule send, 6 a.m. The final confirmation appeared. I clicked without hesitation. The soft click echoed like something ancient breaking free. I looked one last time at the envelope on the kitchen counter, still unopened, still pretending. For years, I whispered, you demanded loyalty. Tomorrow, you'll get consequence. I shut the light. Only the faint blue glow of the screen remained. Outside, the city lights shimmered, unaware of the reckoning about to unfold. At dawn, I brewed coffee and watched the clock tick closer to 6. The silence of the house wrapped around me. Only the soft drip of the pot and the quiet hum of my laptop filled the air. The email was ready. A timer glowed like a warning flare. At exactly 6 a.m., the first message fired off. By 6:03, there was no turning back. At 7:15, the chaos began. My phone buzzed without pause, calls, messages, alerts from people who had spent years ignoring me. Legal teams, board members, journalists, former interns. They were all scrambling to understand. The subject line said it all: license termination, effective immediately. By 8 o'clock, systems started going offline. By 9 o'clock, client portals crashed. At 9:30, IT realized the servers weren't responding to their credentials anymore. And by 10 o'clock, someone on the 12th floor screamed. Their empire, built on stolen code and silenced truth, was crumbling, line by line, password by password. I didn't walk in right away. I parked across the street, watching it unfold. From the outside, the glass building shimmered, still pretending to be perfect. People rushed in and out, phones to ears, faces pale. At 10:45, a Channel 8 reporter caught Lucan at the front entrance. I cracked my window to hear. "Mr. Fry," she called, "is it true WinTech's core product was never legally yours?" Lucan's smile froze. "Ridiculous," he muttered, his voice shaky. "A former associate is spreading lies." "Former founder," the reporter corrected. Behind him, Callista appeared, face white, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "They're pulling out the investors," she whispered. "All of them." Minutes later, my father's car pulled up. He didn't speak to anyone, just stormed inside, his pride cracking at the edges. I stepped out of my car and crossed the street. Security didn't stop me. No one had told them that the woman who'd written the very code, now tearing the company apart, was back, no longer silent. In the boardroom, panic filled the air. People whispered behind laptops. My mother sat frozen at the table, hands wrapped around a full coffee cup. Lucan had lost his tie. His shirt was wrinkled. The confidence was gone. I stood behind the glass wall for a moment, watching the storm they created swallow them whole. Then I stepped in. Silence. This isn't revenge, I said softly. It's the return of what was mine. Lucan rose. You had no right. I had every right, I replied. You let the license expire. You sold what you didn't own. You thought I'd stay quiet. My father's voice trembled. You're destroying your own family's company. No, I said, you destroyed it when you decided I didn't matter. Callista looked at me, tears in her mascara. You're killing us, Marcella. Is this what you wanted? I didn't answer her. Instead, I walked forward, plugged in my flash drive, and cast the proof on the screen. Contracts, timestamps, emails, every version of the product tied to my name, my company, my initials. This, I said, is ownership. The room was still. The final document lit up, a confirmation from the U.S. Patent Office. Active. Underwind Solutions, LLC. With a date. With my name. An investor rose, muttering, "We're done." Others followed. My father sank into a chair, speechless. My mother kept folding her napkin, like she could clean up what had already shattered. You told me this was about protection, I said, turning to her, but it was about control. She whispered, I didn't think it would end like this. No, I replied, you just didn't think I'd fight. Lucan slammed the table. Clients will never trust you now. They won't have to, I said. They'll have the truth. I closed my laptop and looked around. I don't need your apologies or your lies. I just want the world to know what silence really sounds like when it speaks. Then I walked out. Employees watched me pass, too afraid or too ashamed to meet my eyes. Outside, reporters crowded, calling my name. One stepped forward, her tone steady. Ms. Wynn, will you tell your side of the story? I took her card, pocketed it, and looked up at the sky. Let them keep the building. I said, I'll keep the truth. And this time, I didn't look back. 2 weeks after the collapse, the world moved on faster than I expected. Winteka's name still trended online, but mostly as a cautionary tale. I kept away from interviews, away from screens. I thought the quiet meant the war was over. I should have known better. An invitation came through my inbox with an unfamiliar logo, National Tech Innovation Conference, Houston. A polite line in the message caught my attention. We'd like to honor your family's contribution to the field. Family, not me. That single word told me everything I needed to know. So I went, not to be honored, but to witness the next act of their performance. The ballroom was colder than the Hyatt that night months ago. Stage lights pulsed in blue and gold, the kind used to disguise uncomfortable truths in spectacle. The audience shimmered with sequins and ambition. I sat in the back row, a guest pass clipped to my jacket. It read, "M. Wynn attendee." On the screen, my own face appeared before the event even began, a photo from years earlier taken in my first lab. My prototype rested on the workbench behind me. I could still recall the smell of solder and coffee. My throat went dry when I saw the caption beneath the image. Callista Trenum, trailblazer in automation. They hadn't learned. They doubled down. They dressed my ashes in someone else's makeup. Applause erupted as Callista took the stage. She wore a white suit that matched the background perfectly, as if purity could be worn like armor. "Good evening," she began, her tone silky, practiced. "Innovation isn't just about technology. It's about people, about families who dare to dream together." The audience leaned in, mesmerized. Every word that followed was mine. The speech I'd written 2 years ago for an investor summit. The phrasing, the cadence, even the quiet pauses. We envisioned a world where automation would serve humanity, not replace it. My breath stilled. My pulse didn't race. It sank. It wasn't shock anymore. It was recognition. They didn't need to destroy me. They only needed to replace me. Her voice kept flowing, wrapping my ideas in her smile. Every flash of the camera was another nail sealing a coffin I refused to stay in. I glanced around. No one else noticed, or if they did, they chose not to care. To them, the story on the stage was easier to believe. A glamorous face, a perfect family, no miss. Looking back, I think that was the moment my disgust turned into something sharper. Not hate, precision. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the cold shape of the flash drive I'd carried since the day they first erased me. My evidence, my voice. The applause swelled again as Callista paused for effect. She lifted a trophy that looked too heavy for her hand, smiling through the lights. The moderator's voice boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, please celebrate the remarkable contributions of Callista Trenum, a pioneer of ethical automation." Ethical. The word almost made me laugh. I stood up quietly. People barely noticed as I walked down the side aisle. I stopped by the stage technician, a man adjusting cables behind the curtain. "Play this," I said, handing him the flash drive. He blinked. "What is it?" "The truth," I said. "Play it before the next segment. Or after. Either way, it's real." I walked away before he could ask another question. Behind me, Callista continued, her voice confident, echoing through the speakers. I didn't need to turn around to picture it. Her perfectly rehearsed gratitude. Her eyes searching the crowd for validation. Outside the conference hall, the air smelled of humidity and exhaust. I stood under the overhang, watching the hotel staff load catering trays into vans. My reflection flickered in the glass doors behind me, small and distant. And then, from inside, the room erupted, not in applause this time, but in confusion. Murmurs grew into gasps. The technician had played it. The projection shifted from Callista's smiling face to my original video logs, timestamp code entries, prototypes, my signature across patent documents. My voice filled the speakers, describing the first testing phase. Win Solutions, LLC. Independent development. Someone rushed off stage. A man shouted, "Turn it off." I didn't move. A group of attendees poured into the hallway, whispering, checking their phones, their screens lighting up with the leaked video already spreading online. Callista stumbled out minutes later, trophy still in hand, makeup smudged under the stage lights. When she saw me by the exit, she froze. "You had no right," she hissed. "You're ruining me." I met her gaze. "No, I'm correcting the record." Her voice cracked. "Mom said this would fix everything." I almost pitied her then. The way she still believed manipulation could be redemption. "They used you," I said quietly, "the same way they used me. You just don't know it yet." She turned away before I could see if that landed. The night air pressed against my face, thick and electric. My phone buzzed again, messages piling in from journalists, investors, strangers, thanking me for exposing the truth. I didn't reply to any of them. As I stepped off the curb, I heard my own words echo from memory. You can copy my work, copy my face, but you'll never duplicate the silence I survived to write it. Looking back, I didn't realize it then, but that night was more than vindication. It was the end of who I'd been and the beginning of someone who no longer needed to prove she existed. 2 days after the press conference, silence finally returned to the house. Sunlight poured through the curtains in soft ribbons of gold, catching the dust I hadn't bothered to clean. The phone had stopped ringing. Reporters had moved on. Winteca's stock had dropped by half. The empire still stood, but hollow, like a building whose lights were on, but no one lived inside. So when the doorbell rang, I didn't flinch. I dried my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. She stood there. No purse, no jewelry, just a gray coat and the same unreadable expression I'd known my whole life. I came as a mother, she said, not a manager, not a stakeholder. The words felt pre-packaged, like something from a crisis PR memo. I stepped aside, wordlessly, and she walked in, slow and deliberate. The scent of her perfume, lilac and something colder, followed her. In the living room, we sat opposite each other. Neither of us said anything at first. Then she pulled an envelope from her coat and set it gently on the table. "This is for closure," she said. "For all of us." I didn't reach for it. "Closure?" I echoed. "You mean surrender?" Her lips tightened. "Marcella, what's done is done. This is a chance to end things gracefully." "What does that mean?" "You'll sign over the remaining IP. In return, you'll be credited in the company history, honored in the anniversary publication, and given a symbolic board seat. No voting rights, of course. So a trophy, something nice to dust off once a year." She paused. "You'll be remembered." I clicked the pen beside the envelope, the sound sharp in the silence. "This isn't peace. It's packaging." Her voice grew brittle. "I gave up everything for this family. For you." "No," I said. "You gave everything for the image of us. Not for me." Something flickered across her face. Maybe shame, maybe defiance. "You've turned into your father," she said. "Cold, calculated." I didn't deny it. He taught me that power wears a smile, but always sharpens a knife behind its back. We sat in silence, two women shaped by the same war, now standing on opposite ends of it. She finally exhaled. "You think this is freedom? It's isolation. You'll always be one of us." I walked to the desk and returned with a folder. Inside were sealed court documents, proof of ownership, licensing, every dotted line backed by law. I placed them beside her envelope. "This is ownership," I said. "It doesn't beg for recognition. It exists." She stared at the papers. Her hands shook slightly. "You don't have to keep punishing us," she whispered. "I'm not. I'm drawing a line. You confuse boundaries with betrayal." Her voice cracked. "I only wanted peace." "You wanted control," I replied. "There's a difference." She stood, smoothing her coat. Then she walked toward me and opened her arms. "Let me hug my daughter. No bitterness. Just this moment." I didn't move, but I didn't pull away either. Her arms wrapped around me, deliberate, too even, her chin pressed lightly on my shoulder. And then I heard it, the faintest crinkle of paper. She pulled back. her hand subtly slipping the contract back toward her coat pocket. "You almost had me," I said quietly. "Marcella, I was just trying one last time." "I know." Her voice broke. "You're making a mistake." I opened the door. "No, I made one. I thought you'd be proud if I made us powerful. And now I know real power doesn't perform." She paused in the doorway, caught in the amber light of sunset. For a moment, she looked almost human, almost small. But pity is a luxury I no longer afford. "Goodbye, Mother." She nodded and stepped outside. The door closed behind her with no slam, just silence. I stood there for a long time, hand still on the knob. Her hug still clung to my skin, but not like love, like negotiation. On the table, her envelope lay unopened. Beside it, my documents rested, fact beside fiction. Looking back, that was the real ending. Not the scandal, not the lawsuit, just two women, one closing a door, the other pretending she hadn't already lost. The sun sank, the house dimmed. I drew the curtains and let the darkness in. The house was quiet again. I didn't fill it with music or movement. Some silences, I had learned, were not emptiness but restoration. After she left, I sat by the window for a while, watching the trees shift against the dusk like they were whispering forgiveness to one another. The headlines kept coming. Callista Trenum and Lucan Fry resign from Wintech board amidst IP scandal. Founding sister steps forward with truth. But I didn't click. I didn't need to. Their unraveling was no longer my work to manage. 2 mornings later, I unlocked the door of the East Austin Community Center, where I taught now. The space smelled like sawdust and whiteboard markers. Folding chairs were set in a crooked semicircle. 6 girls between 9 and 13 waited for me, laptops open, eyes bright with that mix of curiosity and self-doubt I knew too well. I started the class the way I always did, with silence. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I wanted them to know they could fill the space without permission. "Write something today you're afraid no one will understand," I said. That's usually the line worth keeping. One girl raised her hand. "Even if it's messy?" "Especially if it's messy," I replied. They began typing, and I moved between them, answering questions, correcting syntax, pointing out bugs. Every time one of them looked up with frustration, I saw myself at 11, hunched over my first computer, wondering if I'd ever belong in the room where the future was being written. By late afternoon, the light shifted, warm and forgiving. The girls packed up, high-fived, promised to finish their loops by next week. I stayed behind to clean up the cables. I had just unplugged the projector when I heard it, a soft knock. Not urgent, not forced, just a question wrapped in sound. I opened the door. She stood there, 12, maybe 13. Hair pulled back in a clumsy ponytail. Hoodie too big. Eyes too old. "Hi," she said, her voice trembling. "Are you Dee Dee?" It took a moment for my breath to return. Her eyes were the same shape as her mother's, but softer. "Kinda. I am," I said. She swallowed hard. "Mom doesn't know I'm here." I nodded slowly. "That's okay." She looked down, then back at me. "I want to learn what you made." I stepped aside. She walked in. I didn't ask any more questions. We sat at the table. I pulled out an old laptop, the one I kept for teaching. She hesitated as her fingers hovered over the keys. "Start with your name," I said. She typed it, clumsy at first, then more certain. "I don't know where to begin," she whispered. "Neither did I said. "That's how all good things start." We didn't talk about the family. We didn't talk about what happened. The silence between us wasn't the kind that hurt anymore. It was the kind that healed. She wrote her first loop. I watched her realize it worked. Her eyes widened, and she looked at me like I had handed her something sacred. That's when I knew this wasn't about legacy or revenge. This was about return. Not theirs to me, but mine to myself. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Wintech announces full rebrand after leadership fallout. No comment from founders. I didn't open it. Looking back, I see now that their empire didn't collapse because I exposed them. It collapsed because it had no roots in truth, and no structure built on denial ever stands forever. I walked to the back office and opened a small box in the closet. It only held one thing, the badge from that gala night. Marcella Wynn, founding team, legacy role, guest. I held it in my hands for a long moment. I never threw it away because I wanted to remember what it felt like to be silenced and to remind myself what it meant to speak anyway. Now, no one assigns my title. I write it myself. Later, as she typed beside me, her hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands, I made tea and sat by the window. Outside, the sun dipped behind the buildings of downtown Austin. The city glowed, not with victory, but with possibility. I wasn't erased. I whispered. I was replanted, and now I grow on my terms. I didn't destroy them. I simply stopped letting them rewrite me. Sometimes the hardest truth is this: the people who raise us can also be the ones who erase us. But silence isn't surrender, it can be survival. And when used right, it becomes power. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself after your own family tried to break you? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading every one. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more. There's always another truth waiting to be told.